there's the call for Ruto must go, right? So this is beyond reject finance bill. It's about, no, go. You, your ideologies, your thoughts, we don't have that trust in you. I've just alluded to that. Legally, what does that mean? I had to go back to the Constitution and had a chat with Bob Mkangi, who is a lawyer who's appeared severally on various stations. And I think the conversation we had is, what are the terms for the Constitution allowing for power change? So there's voluntary resignation, which I don't know about you. I don't see Ruto voluntarily resigning. My stance is I'm with the majority of the people. The dispensation must go because it's not serving anyone. If he does, fine. If he doesn't, there's also the impeachment. But that has the responsibility of the National Assembly first. I do not also see a majority of our lawmakers impeaching President Ruto, right? Because I think we have a history of sycophancy and all of these elements that mean people are not ready to stand up against the president. I could be wrong, but these are just my thoughts, guys. So you will share what you're able to in the comments below. I'm learning, you're learning, and I'm just incredibly curious about how we can move forward and what we need to keep in mind. And then there's also the low-hanging fruit. For me, start with the people who are abusing office, right? We have somebody who brought in fake fertilizer or something that just can't help in our growth for agriculture. And for a decision like that to be made, it means it passed through the hands and signatures of many people, right? So we have abuse of office over and over and over again, things that are not double-checked, things that are not confirmed, and then you suddenly find yourself with a situation where, hey, wait a minute, we're dealing with something counterfeit. So I think I feel like the president needs to take a stand. If he's able to make an example of people who are abusing office, maybe, just maybe, he'll begin to gain the trust of people. The problem about all these legalities is it's very hard to know whether or not they can come to be. Will the president resign? Will the president be impeached? Will he, to perhaps save his reputation or save himself, instead say, there are some people around me who need to go? I don't know. So I'm still reading up on it, trying to understand it. There are people who are way more learned about this than I am, so please share your thoughts below. Kama nimekosa, also correct me. But my second thing is, what happens now? What do we do next? The point that I'm going to make may sound a little bit out of place with everything, but this is what I notice starts to happen. You begin to see an initially united group of people beginning to turn on each other, right? And I don't know if it's anyone's fault. Maybe that's just human nature. So there's a lot of finger pointing, blame game, character assassination, divide and conquer, gatekeeping. A lot of this tends to follow a revolution, and if I may say so, what we just witnessed in Kenya was a revolution. It was the will and power of the people superseding that of the state, right? So I think what people would hope happens is after this we begin to see drastic measures, the resignation, the impeachment, the firing of people from office, or we begin to move towards dialogue, which I also don't know how people feel about dialogue. Personally, I think people are jaded. How much dialogue can you do? And then you find yourself here 20 years later because of dialogue. But I would say the dream would be we move towards a conversation about what needs to happen next. And it's drastic. It is drastic. Everything that's happened so far has been radical. Radical times call for radical measures. So it's about that. It's about going to the table. It's about a group of people having this dialogue with the government or with the incumbent, whatever government. It's about having a conversation about it. But then what tends to happen is, naturally, there will be people who stand out in a revolution. Whether or not that's what they wanted, they are seen as those who carried the sentiments of a majority of people, whether on social media, whether on the ground. And whether or not we like it or whether or not we want to hear it, there are already people emerging as those who could lead these conversations. But I feel like that's already a conversation that seems to be taking its own course. I don't have opinions on who, what, why, All I'm saying is, especially for Gen Z and especially for millennials and people who are at the forefront, be very vigilant. Be very vigilant, as this is usually a tactic that is deployed. Because remember, you also have people on the other side possibly deployed to derail the conversation. So you will notice character assassination. You have to make your own informed decisions about who is being credibly, quote unquote, assassinated and who isn't. So we have class division, divide and rule tactic. Fake news and propaganda is going to also be something that's going to come up a lot. And then what happens is gradually people begin to turn on each other, people begin to blow up steam on each other. I have witnessed, and a lot of us have witnessed, revolutions, whether it's historically, whether it's in the recent past, and that can be an unfortunate result that comes out of it. So please be very, very, very vigilant. There was no quote unquote core leader for this movement, and that is one of the most powerful things that came out of it. But what happens now when there is a call to have a group of people carrying the sentiments of a majority? Again, please comment down below. Maybe some of you have better experience in previous moments like this in history that have turned into something solid. I just feel like before we have what we want, it is often preceded by elements of, if not chaos, but also of divide and rule. And we have to be vigilant about that, because that would be a travesty to something that I think has been an incredible moment. I think the other point that I want to make, that I feel is critical, is about why we use our voices, why you used yours, why I used mine. And it's also to understand that activism does not have anything to do with clout. By that I mean, when you take a very strong, blatant stand, say in this case against a system, against a government, you stand to lose more than you gain. In the heat of it, it might seem as you're being lauded and celebrated, and a lot of the time you can get carried away with that wave, and it's valid to be lauded and celebrated. I think there's two things you need to think about. The two things you need to ask yourself is, what is your personal conviction? Where do you really stand? And what happens when the dust settles? So when everything is gone, when we resume to some sense of normalcy, as we always will do, and suddenly things are quiet, your family and friends, do they support the stand you're taking? Does it matter to you? Because you need to have those conversations with them. You need to explain, again, if that's who you are, if that's your setup and your family. I don't know, everybody has a different setup. I'm going to speak from a personal perspective. For somebody who has been working for, 20 years in media, in advocacy, in activism, whatever it is, taking a stand like this doesn't necessarily equate to having some incredible results in the end. And I asked myself, how do you feel about it? And I said, I feel fine. I feel fine because I feel very strongly about what's happening in the country. So no, people were not going there just to take a quick photo and head out. If you were in the protest, if you were online, if you were part of the conversations, you stand to lose more than you stand to gain. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means you have to really question your why. And you have to think more about when the dust settles than about the heat of the moment. Because the moment it's addictive. It's adrenaline. It's collective. Like you're literally united with a country. And then when everything settles down, what happens to your privileges that you enjoyed? Are they compromised? And if they are, does that matter to you? I've had privilege. I'm literally an example of a person who has, in many ways, benefited from access and privilege. That's something I worked hard for, but it's also a result of a system that benefits not a majority, but benefits those who are either able to navigate it or those who, quite frankly, abuse it, right? So in that sense, perhaps I have coddled and courted and, enabled the system. I've benefited from it, and I've benefited from the privileges that come with where I've come from and what I've managed to do for myself in the name I've managed to build. But the thing about it is that a system that favors a select few is a broken system. It's broken. So the question is, why do you want to enable and serve a broken system? Yeah, maybe you benefit from it here and there for whatever reason. Everyone's grind and everyone's thought process is valid. I don't know you. I'm not speaking to your direct experience. I'm speaking to something that exists, a reality. And I made the decision to say, I don't want to enable a broken system. I don't know what's going to happen after all this. No idea. And for the first time in a long time, I haven't really thought about that. I thought about the fact that I don't want this to be the country I grew up in, Wow. I don't want this to be the country that my kids grow up in, that is not even safe for children and for women and for men who stand their ground. I don't want to enable a system that takes from the people, that claims that it's going to benefit people, and then it comes back to gaslight. And yes, I have done courtesy calls with present officials. I have considered in the past being part of this system. I, in 2022, was invited to be part of this system. God knows what would have happened if I had agreed to it. All I'm saying is right now, probably those invitations may never come again. And that's fine. And that's not easy to say. That is not a flex. That is not showing off. That's simply saying you stand for the right thing. And in many ways, you stand to lose certain things and privileges. And you have to ask yourself, at what point am I going to continue to live a life in a system that is broken? So whatever comes out of this, I don't know. I love being Kenyan. I love being a global citizen as well. I love the work I do around advocacy, whether it's menstrual health, whether it's the rights of women, young people, men. I love the work I do. I want to continue doing the work I do. I want us to work more collaboratively together, and I need to figure out what it looks like after this. Who are you collaborating with? How are you collaborating with people? How are we doing something that pushes towards a just system? And maybe we'll make mistakes along the way. We'll just keep learning. But what is our conviction? What is your conviction in all this? Sit with yourself quietly and validate the trauma around what you've seen. Also take time to self-check. Your wellness check is important. And then just ask, okay, what happens next to me? How am I working differently? How am I moving differently? How am I dating differently? We need protest bays now. Protest bay ako happy. We're not just talking about what's your favorite color. No, what do you believe in? Can we talk about the Constitution? Things are different. Things will never be the same again. And change is uncomfortable, but change is inevitable. So what side of the change are you standing in? And then make peace with whatever comes from it. I don't know what's going to happen to me, to you, to people around. We don't know. We're just saying we're tired of a broken system. Collectively, we want more than the broken system, not just for us, but for everyone. So keep following the conversation, keep being strong, keep using your voice, keep using the voice and platform that you have. Plug into the bigger conversations, plug into the bigger organizations that are doing so much in the front lines for people who have lost a lot and for really pressing for the conversation. Don't forget yourself in all of this. But more than anything, don't forget that we are in such a momentous occasion, and we also have to stop and appreciate that a lot of people have lost out, whether it's their businesses, whether it's the loss of people that they love. And in the end, a revolution has been born. So how do we hold those two truths together? Grieving and hope. How do we hold grief and hope together?